Amazing that way. They pick up on
Yeah,
everything for us.
yeah, they do.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us for No Law Firm Left Behind. Dave Myers here. We are without Jim today. He's just not up for the show. He had some surgery last week on his shoulder and he's broken. So I'm going to go ahead and try my best to fill in for him. And I want to introduce our guest today, Damon Hacker, the president and co-founder of Vestige Digital Investigations. Damon, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Dave.
So, Damon, you've been in this space addressing breach as well as pre-breach, but post-breach in particular for quite a while. Would you mind sharing with our viewers what your background is?
Sure. Yeah, I can do that. So, I think it had to happen, right? With the last name of Hacker, I was pretty much destined, to this. So I've been involved in technology for a long time, actually well before I even knew what the term hacker meant as a kid from there. But I've been involved for about 22 years in the digital forensics and cybersecurity space. 18 years as president and co-founder of Vestige Digital Investigations. We do two things in life. We do the proactive cybersecurity and then the reactive data breach incident response. We get parachuted in when companies have problems, from there. And the two obviously play hand in hand. The thing I've always said is that, that which we learn today from a breach side of things gets put into our program and our proactive side the same afternoon on that, and kind of vice versa from there. But any kind of data breach on the anything digital, we get involved in from there.
So when you use the phrase parachuted in essence, what's already hit the fan for most of these people. Do you find that you're brought in while the breach is still hot, where things are still going on, or are you usually brought in after the fact to sort of figure out what happened, but things have already died down? How does that break down? What do you normally see when you hit the ground?
Yeah, it's both. Yeah, so there's a fair number of times when we get a panicked call. It's the very first thing they've discovered something in their environment. Maybe not even know exactly what's going on, but they're seeing some indicators, and they're concerned enough that they want to start checking into it. I would say that has changed in the last several years. It used to be that we didn't get those calls quite as fast, right? We got the call after that knee-jerk reaction was already done by IT, and they've gone down that path, and then maybe even gotten to a place where they realized they were in over their heads, or didn't have the right tools, or weren't exactly sure what was happening. Maybe they got insurance involved or law firms involved, and they made a recommendation that you need to have somebody from a forensic side come in. So I would say, probably in about the last maybe 3 years or so, we've gotten much more of those almost immediate calls. And part of that's because, people know us in the environment. They know that they need to get somebody in. We've got relationships with companies, up front. And so they're calling us as soon as it happens, from there.
Got it.
And that's,
instead of being brought in a little bit further down the road, basically.
Yeah. Which is actually a really good thing, because one of the things that we've noticed, and we talk about this a lot, has been that okay, so that knee-jerk reaction is we're going to take whatever heroic efforts are to basically figure out and contain and then start mitigating the issue. Well, sometimes that can actually trample on the exact evidence that we're going to be looking at from there. So when we get involved earlier in the picture, it's usually a better outcome. I always said, the thing is that the worst thing you can do is realize that there's something going on there, and then take use the nuclear option, right? Wipe the entire hard drive or something like that, just because you want to get rid of them. And then after the dust all settles and the legal team's looking at it, and somebody says, well, how do we know we got everything? How do we know how bad it was? Did everything get touched? Those kind of things. And, where you might have been able to sweep that under the floor, under the rug, in years past, now you pretty much have to be able to answer that question. Otherwise you can, find yourself with a larger liability from a legal side of things. And that, so,
And so what you're seeing is that as sort of this incident response, as it becomes more, sadly, as it becomes more and more a normal part of doing business, people have gotten more sophisticated, or at least more cautious in trying to take a wider view approach to reacting, instead of just going straight to, all right, we're just going to format everything and restore from backup and move on with life.
Yeah. I think awareness is really the word for it, right? I mean, they now recognize that, there's a little bit more, to this, that we need to.
More to it than just getting back up and running.
Yep, exactly.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So when you are involved in these various breaches, we have this image. We have this, the guy or girl in the basement with the hoodie, hunched over their laptop doing the hacking, right? That's what's been popularized in the media, and it's still the image that we see on a lot of posts and whatnot. But in your experience, who are the bad actors here? I mean, how many of them are lone wolves? How many of them are part of organizations, nation states? What have you? I mean, who are you seeing that's actually doing the bad things these days?
Yeah, both actually. You see that. One of the things that I would say is there's kind of two camps. You've got certain compromises that happen because it's a crime of opportunity, right? And the image I always like to use in my my presentations, and that is think about driving into your neighborhood tonight, and not one, not two, not five, but 50 burglars are going up and down the road, rattling the windows, knocking on the doors to see if somebody is home and see if there's a vulnerability, a way in. And that absolutely happens 24/7, 365 on the internet. There's all those kind of attacks, and even think about it. It's not even necessarily that they're rattling the outside windows. You're getting spam, right? Phishing expeditions and that kind of stuff. I mean, I get gobs and gobs of them on a daily basis. And one of them, if one of them sticks in an environment, then the bad guys are in. So you do see a lot of that. And those tend to be the lone wolves, somebody who's just giving, a little bit creative on that and just throwing a bunch of stuff against the wall to see if something sticks from there. So a lot of the is there. But there's also an awful lot of organized crime and nation-sponsored attacks as well. Those tend to be a little bit more strategic in nature, right? So if somebody has something, right? If they're in the financial industry, or if they're in the defense industry, or they've got something from an intellectual property side of things that somebody would want, then you kind of see more of a nation state or an organized crime aspect on that. It's why we talk about things like, in the big areas, obviously, are Russia and the former bloc. Those tend to be more on the financial side of things. So ransomware, cryptoware, that kind of stuff is what you're going to see generally coming out of there. China, North Korea, it's going to be more on the intellectual property and national secrets, that kind of stuff that's going on. And then we see some stuff from Central and South America, and that too tends to be a little bit more on the financial side of things.
Okay.
So yeah.
So you get pulled in when things have gone wrong. How many of the instances where you've been brought in and investigated what happened, whether it be a crime of opportunity or whether it be a concerted crime effort, a strategic attack like you were stating, how many of these were preventable?
Yeah. The vast majority of them, and probably. Now, the one thing with it is when you look at somebody who's from a concerted side of things, right? If somebody really wants to get in, if you've got a motivated attacker who wants to get into the environment, they're always going to be able to get in. You can't be 100% secure. But some of the tactics and techniques that are used are some of the same things that people fall victim to on the crime of opportunity side of things. So phishing, spear phishing attempts, having bad passwords, that kind of stuff that can be easily guessed or brute forced, to get somebody in there, they can do it. But, if you take somebody who's a motivated attacker who wants to get in, think about things like, they would even, possibly, you have a position open, they're going to take your position, work for you and work on from the inside, from there. So there's always going to be that opportunity for, somebody who's motivated. So I like to look at the other ones, right? The ones that are the crimes of opportunity, because those are the ones that when you really look at it, that, almost all of those can be preventable. From there, and it's little things, right? The going back to the whole concept of the neighborhood, what we really want to do is we want to put the right kind of controls in place so that we make our house less attractive to the bad guy, right? I mean, unfortunately, there's so much low-hanging fruit out there that the bad guys go and choose someone else, right? Or the joke I always use too is, it's like the two kids in the forest that run across the bear, and the one reaches down to start tying his shoes and says, "Why, you got to outrun the bear?" He says, "No, I just need to outrun you." Right? That's really what we want to do. If we can make our systems better and let the bad guy pass on to it, then you're going to prevent the vast majority of those items.
Yeah. So it's really about making sure that you're a less attractive target than somebody else. And a lot of times, let's take your, by the way, I use a similar analogy a lot of times when I'm explaining this to people. I put it in the context of physical security for people. And so what you're saying is lock the deadbolt, make sure you have a porch light, things like that, just simple, basic things that are going to make your property, your network, your computer, your data, a less attractive target than the one next door. Is that pretty much what you're suggesting?
Yeah, with one little twist on that. So I would totally agree with you that most of the things are pretty easy to do. The one thing I like to think about though too is that it's a layered approach, right? And so using that as an example, the deadbolt's a good idea. Turning the lights on, setting a timer so that lights on the inside turn on and off at different times from there. Maybe having that sign in the front yard that says, that you've got ADT or some other company that's monitoring it. As we start building more and more things up like that, it makes it less attractive. So that's one thing. And then the second thing it does is it makes it less reliant upon just one control and a single failure point, right? And so the idea is if we can layer the controls in the environment, it does a couple of different things. One is hopefully, again, it removes that single point of failure. Secondly, they may get through one, but they can't get through the second obstacle or third or fourth. Okay, that's great. So you've prevented them. Even if we can't prevent them, if we're at least slowing them down so that there's more of a likelihood that we catch it before they've done damage, then that's a good thing as well. So for all those reasons, I like kind of a layered approach to the security.
That makes a lot of sense. Let's get to what I think everybody's tuning in for here today. It's the title of the show. What are these things? What are these layers? We mentioned 5 things. What are those 5 things that people should be doing that are going to make the biggest impact?
Yeah. So again, looking at it from the standpoint of the crimes of opportunity, versus a motivated attacker, kind of things. Not that those 5 things, they'll help on that side of things as well. It'll make it less easy for somebody to get in. The biggest thing I would say is find a framework. And there's a lot of cybersecurity frameworks out there. The NIST cybersecurity framework is a perfect one to start with. The truth of the matter is each one of them, there's probably 70 to 80% of overlap amongst all of them. It's the devil's in the details in terms of what we're really trying to protect. But find one of those and start focusing on those controls. And the reason being is that first off, there's a whole lot of people who are a lot smarter than I am who've come together to put those things together, and they really are best practices. And the thing that allows you to do is to start focusing on what's really important instead of a shotgun approach that I see so oftentimes. A lot of organizations do. They take a shotgun approach to it. They're looking for a silver bullet. Maybe the president or the managing partner of a firm or something goes out and they hear from one of their peers that, oh, we just put in this system and it's great. Well, that may be true for that organization, but for your organization, that may have no bearing on the way that you work and the way that your security works and that kind of stuff. And then you've spent all your money and resources on that solution, and 6 months later you have a compromise, and the execs are looking around going like, well, how is that? We just spent X amount of dollars on it. We just did cybersecurity last month. Why are we getting anything? And so that's one thing I say is, pick one that's there and start, get a baseline and really kind of figure out what you're doing well, what you're not doing well, and start shoring that up. One of the reasons I like the framework, the NIST cyber framework, is the fact that it's kind of holistic in that it looks at things not only just from the standpoint of prevention, which you do need to do, obviously, but it also looks at things like how are we going to detect it when it's in the environment, when somebody's in the environment, and what are we going to do to actually mitigate it, contain it, and recover from it. In essence, it's kind of making it part of the business process. And you kind of alluded to it a little bit earlier when you said that, companies are, the awareness, and they're starting to recognize that they just have to have the right things in place. So number one, start with some kind of best practice framework and start working on that. From there, I think there's some tactical things that, right off the cuff need to be in place, right? Security awareness training, right? Our weakest link in this entire thing are the end users. And it's easy to fall for something. I mean, there's so many really good phishing and spear phishing things out there. I mean, there's somewhere I even look at it sometimes. I'll be like going, man, I don't know if that's real or not, but my gut reaction is delete. Right. I would rather have that happen and somebody ends up calling me and saying, hey, I've been sending you an email and you're not answering. Oh, I'm sorry. You know what? I thought it was spam. I thought it was a phishing expedition, something like that. Unfortunately, the vast majority of people do it the other way. Right. Well, I'm not really sure if that's legitimate. Oh, I better check it out. And they look at it and then they end up somewhere. So that security awareness training will go a long way for identifying the kinds of things that end users are doing. Third, multi-factor authentication, two-factor authentication, something there, right? By definition, we always, from a layman's terms, we always say two-factor authentication is something you know and something you have. The something you know are your user credentials, and the something you have is some other device, whether it's your cell phone that you get a text message, an authenticator app that you get a one-time password on, you're approving it, something like that, because the reality of that is, although not 100% infallible, it increases your probability of, it decreases the risk, decreases the probability that some attacker is going to both be able to compromise the thing that your credentials, and the thing that you have, that device from there. So, you're probably, 99% of the way preventing your accounts from being attacked with multi-factor authentication or two-factor authentication on there. Speaking of credentials, the next one is don't ever use the same password in multiple places, right? And that's a tall order to ask for somebody if they've got the same favorite password that they've been using for years. They use it in every single place. The problem is it might be secure in your environment, but if you're using it somewhere else, then it gets compromised there, and the bad guys have a path right into your environment from there. And even if you're taking your favorite password and making changes to it, the ones like substituting certain characters, a 3 for an E or a 5 for an S, or adding, the 1, the 2, the 3 at the end of it, or some kind of symbol, it still cuts down the number of attempts that a bad guy needs to take on that. So we don't want to, you never want to do that. So your friend in that one is a password vault. You have to have a password vault. I just looked at it because we're going through a migration on that kind of stuff. I have 978 accounts in my password vault. Every one of them is different. I know 3 passwords. I know the password to my master password to there. I do know my password to the office because I use it all the time. By the way, it's a fairly long password. It changes every 60 days. The current one is about 21 or 23 characters. It's a passphrase, right? Something there. So I know those two. And then I have one password that's a throwaway password that I use for things that are inconsequential. Things like if I'm going to register for a white paper or a message board, something like that, where I really don't care. And that's all I know. And then the last piece, and it goes hand in hand with the framework, is have an assessment done, a readiness assessment, whether it's you doing it yourself against the framework or hire somebody on the outside to look at it. They can give you a real fresh perspective in terms of what things are there, and really kind of set that baseline for here's where you're at and these are where you need to spend your priorities on it. Cybersecurity is not a project. It's an ongoing process that you have to adopt. That's the big things I see.
Let me ask you one question, just to clarify for people.
Okay.
You mentioned password vault.
Yeah.
You don't mean Excel. You don't mean keep it on
No.
the Excel file.
And if you are going to do it, don't store it on your desktop called passwords.xls.
There you go. Perfect. Yeah. No, I only say that because I have come across multiple people through the years that said, "Oh yeah, I keep all my passwords in a spreadsheet and I keep it on the server."
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Don't do that. That's bad.
No. Yeah. That's a great point. Yeah. So, kidding aside, you can't believe the number of times when we've done an investigation, yes, that's exactly what we find. Password, Excel file somewhere or a Word file, somewhere. But don't do that.
All right. Well, Damon, I think the 5 points that you made here are nothing that you said has a significant headache associated with it. It's just going to help people improve. And these are small steps. You don't have to go from 0 to every single control implemented in some of these frameworks. It's simply saying, all right, where are we? What are the small things that we can do to get a little bit better and make us a little less attractive target? So just really spot on. Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure working with you. You always have so many great things to add. Thanks again, Damon.
No problem. Thanks for the opportunity. Good talking with you again. So look forward to the next time.
All right. We'll be back again next week, same time, 10:30 a.m. on Tuesday. And we hope you all have a great week ahead. Thanks.
Sounds good. Thanks.